Remember that when we talk about report for these classes, for professional writing particularly, we are referring to formal reports. We're not talking about the informal reports that you can find elsewhere. So while we were discussing it in the last class, I told you that for our class, we are going to be taking up only the shorter ones, which are the formal reports, right? But we did discuss the structure of the longer reports. And I told you that as an example or for a sample of any of these, you could check the government website, which is the Niti Aayog site, which has most of these longer versions of. I mean, you can find it elsewhere as well, but an easy access to this would be their site. So there are plenty of it available. You can check in for the longer version to have a glimpse of how a longer version of the report or a voluminous report would look like. But why are we doing only the shorter versions? Because first of all, we have time and space constraints, right? We cannot keep on writing longer ones, which runs to 100 pages, 150 pages. We don't have the space and time for that. And second thing is, as far as the language part and the template part is concerned, it's mostly the same, right? The bigger one will have more headings and subheadings to it based on the need for what, the purpose for what it is written. However, the language that you use for both and the basic structure for both remains the same, right? So for that reason, we'll be doing only the shorter formal reports, and we'll also be looking at what we call as proposals, right? So two things, one is technical reports and the second thing is or formal reports. Both are same. Technical and formal reports basically are the same. That and also the technical proposals. So this class we'll look at the formal reports, and the next class we'll look at the proposals, right? The technical proposals. So that should sum up a little bit on what a report would look like. Okay. So I'm going to share the screen with you. So the first one is sort of a warm-up exercise, wherein, the report is mostly written for you. So you're only going to fill in the gaps in that so as to understand how the language looks, right? If you have signed in through a mobile phone, I think it should be the best thing because these are all snapshots of the questions are mostly in the form of snapshots. So it is better if you zoom on your side than I do it here so that you can see clearly. But anyway, let me share the screen with you so that you can see things clearly. Just a moment. Guys, just give me a moment. It shows some error on my side when I'm trying to share the screen. Just a moment. Okay. Guys, just give me a moment to stay in the call. I'll be back in 2 minutes. My screen is showing some error. I'm unable to share the PPT. Just stay back 2 minutes and I'll be back. Okay?
Okay, ma'am.
Sure. Okay, the screen is visible to you now, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right. Okay, so I would like you to go through this slowly, right? You just need to study the chart and then we are going to do something with the next question that comes up, right? So please spend another 2 to 3 minutes trying to understand what the chart is conveying to you, and then we'll get to the question, okay? Meanwhile, I'll set something else up as well. So just take 2 to 3 minutes. You can read through and understand what this chart is talking about before we can get to the question, okay? Okay, are you able to read it or not? These are what you refer to as trend charts, right? So, like people who do studies on trends, right? So, all of these usually they are part of the shorter reports. Like they won't be a very serious study or a very lengthy study, or which is also called as the longitudinal study. It's for a very, it's for an immediate purpose, an immediate result for something, just to point out some trend at a particular place in a given time. So these are all, they're very short in the nature of the whole report, right? It's not like your other voluminous report where you produce it in bulk. And all companies, in one or the other sense, takes these kind of studies up. So are you done analyzing this particular charts? So one more thing, when you're looking at learn to take notes when you're reading charts and graphs and all that, right? So we'll do one thing. I'll take you to the next slide. So just go through it. And once you are done reading, we'll come back again to this slide. Okay. The screen is still visible to you, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So just go through this one, read it entirely right now. You'll see a few blanks in there. Don't bother with it right now. Just read through. And once you're done with that, I'll take you back to the previous slide again. Okay. So let me know once you are done so that we can move on.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll be leaving a few words or phrases in your chat box for you. So basically, you can use that to fill up these blanks. But before you do that, you can maybe once again go back to the previous slide. Can I show you the first one again, or are you still reading this one? Right? Still reading?
Done, ma'am.
We can go to the previous ones. Right? Once more, we look at it and then we can get back to this again. Okay, so there are at least 5 phrases there in your chat box. So now we'll get back to this report part, right? So this is what I refer to as a short report. So any formal short report would be this long, right? So say somewhere around 100 words or say 120 to 140 words, maximum of 140 words. Okay, usually it does not go beyond that. Which means I'm also trying to say that your formal reports, a short formal report is always going to be similar in size to letters, right? So your official letters, your formal letters, usually the word limit allowed for them is 100 to 150 words. Same is applicable to reports also, right? So this is a sample of such a short report, and a short report can be written for several purposes. Like one of the reason why you write this is to study trends, to point out a particular specific problem at your workplace, or something like a skill report, right? Or a training report. All of those are examples of formal reports, right? Last time when we looked at it, I also talked to you about the FIRs, right? The ones that we usually write at the police station. The first investigation reports are also a kind of a formal report. But we are not going to look at that. We are going to be mostly concentrated on the ones that we write in workplaces usually. Okay. Right. So can we try and fill up the blanks that you see here? So first we'll do that then, and then we'll sit and analyze how the language and the grammar of the sentences in this particular report looks like, right? Before we do the second exercise where you're going to actually construct the whole of the report. Okay. So look at this one. This report summarizes trends in fatal workplace accidents and work-related stress during the period 1990 to 2003. While Dash fell in Britain from 350 in 1990 to 180 in 2003, the latter rose during Dash period from 2 lakh cases in 1990 to 4,50,000 in 2003. How would we fill up this blank? You have some options in the chat boxes. Please look for yourself in that and tell me what would be the answers.
Ma'am, can you please go to previous slide once?
The previous slide, okay. All right. So every time you have, a report that needs to be written, especially the ones which has charts and graphs, it's a good idea to have handwritten notes. The question that you're going to work on after this, I will show you how usually people prepare handwritten notes. Okay. So right now we'll work on this, and then while we're doing that, I can show you how that. There are different ways people do it based on their own idea and suitability. But I'll show you one sample of how that is done as well. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. Right now, can we go to the next one? Read. What do you think would be the answer? This report summarizes trends in fatal workplace during the period while what fell in Britain from 350 in 1990 to 180 in 2003. It should be easy. I don't think it's a difficult one to answer. Yeah, the first one has to be former, right? So basically what? Yeah, first blank has to be the former. And what does this former refer to? If you had studied the chart properly, you see it here, right? So the first chart, which is the fatal accidents at work, right? So from 350 in 1990, it has fell to 180 in 2003. So your x-axis is basically the year and y is the numbers total, right? So former refers to the fatal accidents. Look at the sentence here. This report summarizes trends in fatal workplace accidents. So former, because that is the first one mentioned. And if you had to talk about the work-related stress, then what is the word you'll use? The opposite of former would be? Latter, right? So here, but because we are talking about the fatal workplace accidents, you're going to use the word former. Whichever one is written first is former, and the one that is written later is called the latter one. Okay. So the former fell in Britain from 350 in 1990, so on and so forth. The latter, which is basically work-related stress, rose during dash period from the 2 lakh cases to 4,50,000 cases? Answer would be? So 2 lakh to 4,50,000, right? In 1990, it was 2 lakh, right here, this side, if you can see. And then in 2002, 2003, it rose to 4,50,000, right? So the answer has to be? Are people following or are you confused? The answer is the same, right? Yeah, I think somebody has already answered. The same, right? Because in the same period, read the sentence together. This report summarizes, so both it's looking at the fatal workplace accidents, trends in fatal workplace accidents, and also trends in work-related stress, right? During the period of 1990 to 2003. While the former one has slowed down, the other one has risen. And this is in reference to the same period. If you study this chart properly, you can see that, like we just saw. Okay. So first one is the former and the second blank is the same period. The latter rose during the same period from 2 lakh cases in 1990 to 4,50,000 in 2003. The most pronounced decrease in accidents occurred between 1990 and 1995 when only 190 took place. Okay. During dash years, until 1998, they underwent a slight increase to reach 205 before falling to an all-time low of just 160 deaths in 2000. So what would be your options? You've answered this and the following, but is that for this blank? I don't think so, right? What would be the answer? So you're left with themselves, this and the following. The following, right? Is it not? During the following years until 1998, because this is directly connected to the sentence number 3, right? The most pronounced decrease in accidents occurred between 1990 and 1995 when only 190 took place. During the following year, so which means basically after 1995 until 1998. So the following years after 1995 until 1998, they underwent a slight increase to reach 205 before falling to an all-time low of just 160 deaths in 2000. Okay. Then next one, what would be the answer? Dash then rose to 210 in 2001 before decreasing to 180 in 2003. This, right? This then rose to 210. This means, what is this referring to? This refers to what here? The deaths, right? This refers to the deaths. This then rose to 210 in 2001 before decreasing to 180 in 2003. Now, work-related stress, on the other hand, right, underwent a constant. So the previous case, deaths, we are still discussing deaths on both things, but this then rose to refer to deaths due to fatal workplace accidents, right? Now, the next part is on the deaths related to work-related stress. So work-related stress, on the other hand, and underwent a constant increase during dash period and shows no signs of speaking. The largest increase occurred between 1995 and 1998 to 99, when the number of cases climbed from 260,000 to 420,000. What would be the answer here? Again, the answer here would be this only, right? During this period, and shows no signs of peak. Yes, correct. So the answer here again is this. This is a demonstrative pronoun, right? Once it's already mentioned, you don't have to repeat work-related stress again. Instead of that, you're using the demonstrative pronoun this, right? So again, blank number 5 would be this again. This period and shows no signs of peaking. Now, In conclusion, the two charts show that while British workplaces are becoming safer, employees feel dash to be under greater pressure. What do we have here? Themselves, right? That's the only one left anyway here. Employees feel themselves to be under greater pressure. Okay. So the first blank is the former, second one is the same, next one is the following, fifth one is this, and sorry, fourth one is this, fifth one is this, and sixth one is themselves. Okay. Now you tell me something about, after having read this, what do you think about the language of the formal reports? How does it look to you? Tell me something about the verbs that are used in this report that you see here. What are the verbs? So in the first one, you have the verb summarizes, right? Then fell, then rose. Occurred, right? What's the nature of these verbs? These are what you refer to as formal verbs, right? We discussed this during our discussion on the formal, informal. Yeah, Arjun, you have a question?
No, ma'am, I thought I have to answer. Ma'am, these
Oh,
are
okay.
simple past tense
Huh.
and simple present tense verbs.
Yes, yeah, correct. Yeah. So they are formal verbs, right? So basically, I wanted to point out to you that, like we mentioned in the previous sessions, that we don't have phrasal verbs used anywhere, right? This is one thing that I wanted to take your attention to. Do we have any phrasal verbs? You understand what are phrasal verbs? Yes, no?
No, ma'am.
What are phrasal verbs? I think you've had a lecture on that in the course on English one, right? So examples like look after, right? Or come across, or bring about, right? A lot of them actually. So basically, when you have a verbal complex, right, wherein there's one verb and then it's followed by a preposition, which is also referred to as an adverbial particle. So that kind of construction is called a phrasal verb, and those phrasal verbs are usually not allowed in the formal language, right? If you look at this particular example that's given here, you'll understand that the same case has been applied here. We don't see the presence of these kind of phrasal verbs. Instead, you have singular, not singular, you'll have what you refer to as formal verbs, right? Summarizes, right? Occurred, rose, fell, right? Underwent. All of them are formal verbs. There's no verbal complex like a phrasal verb that is used. So this is one aspect of the formal writing, right? Whether it's report or letter or email, it is same across all the professional texts that we do not use phrasal verb. Now, about the tense that you were talking about, right? So a little bit more about the tense that's used. The first one is summarizes, right? This is your verb. Then the next one is fell. Then it is rose. Then it is occurred. Then it is underwent. Then you also have decreasing. Then there is shows. I'm only writing the one that are new. Okay, some of them are repeating, so I'm just putting it in here. I'm not using those. I'm only writing the ones which are newer. Then there's climbed, right? Becoming, feel, right? So look at these verbs that we have here. What do you think about them?
Ma'am, they are in mostly simple present or simple past tense.
Right. So you have simple present tense, you have simple past tense, right? Only in one or two cases you have decreasing and becoming. Can we point towards that particular one? Then rose to 210 before decreasing to 180. And then the last one, workplaces are becoming safer. So are becoming, what is this one?
Present continuous.
Present continuous. Before decreasing to? Decreasing to? Decreasing is what? This is also what? In present continuous,
Present
right? We do not
continuous.
have sorry?
Yes, ma'am, continuous.
Present continuous, right? So, which means mostly the report is going to either use simple present tense or simple past tense, right? Simple past tense is usually when you're going to report something properly, right? Like you're going to show a trend and you have to report something that has happened in the past. So, in that sense, obviously, without discussing too much, we know past tense is to be used. But why is it like this? You might want to say that, but this is a report, yet ideally we should be using only past tense. Why are we using present tense? Now, keep in mind that the overall tense of the report, right, any report that you write, in spirit, it is basically in past tense only. But because there is a confusion in the, English tense endings. So this would be new to you. Usually we don't talk about this because it is not, in accordance with how we teach tense and aspects generally. But you should keep in mind that in the practical use and the practical purpose, the forms of tense which usually are taught to us as present form tenses, right? Like for example, summarizes or shows and all of these. This can actually be used to convey past time also, right? So doesn't matter whether it looks like summarizes or shows, but if you read, you understand that it basically is also sort of a reporting tense, right? So when you're using tenses in the report format, all of what you see here, irrespective of what it is marked as, right? Basically, we are talking about the past tense only, right? Did you get it? So even summarizes or shows, they're all reporting tenses. It's not like, one is in present tense, one is in past tense. This form of tenses can also be used to report in the past tense, right? This is particularly with regards to writing text like formal reports, right? When you take out these sentences individually out of the context, then we may comment on them as, simple present tense or simple past tense. So you can choose either to use the simple past tense format, like instead of summarizes, you can say summarized, right? Or instead of shows here, you can say showed, right? Or you even have the authority to use words like they have used here, summarizes, shows, feel, right? So I'm saying if you want, you can convert them to past tense and write also. Still, it won't be considered wrong. Okay? Yes? No? Okay, so just keep this one point about the tense in mind, that you are allowed to use either a mix of both this is about the form that I'm talking about. You can either use the simple present tense forms or the simple past tense form, a mix of that, or you can keep the whole of the document either in the simple past tense or the simple present tense, right? Both of those tense forms are acceptable for the report formats. Okay, all right. And this is applicable for the shorter reports as well as the longer reports. In both places, the language would remain the same. Anything else that you have noticed? What about the voice? Are we using active voice or are we using passive voice?
Ma'am, passive voice.
Can you give me examples of passive voice constructions here? So passive voice means the verb morphology would be be plus past participle form, right? Do we see passive forms anywhere? You already have, I think I've put down all the verbs there. You can take a look at them and tell me whether they are in passive or active forms.
Ma'am, they are in active forms.
They're all in active form, right? They're all in active form. Certain kind of reports, and I'll tell you what kind of reports. Or before I tell you, can you tell me what kind of reports will have passive verb forms?
Ma'am,
What
professional
kind of
report.
Yeah, no. I'm saying, what kind of reports. By that I mean, which kind of professionals or which kind of space would use more of passive verbs. The media reports, right? We know that there are reports in media as well. So most of these media reports, they may take up passive forms to write on the reports or report events, right? And that is also because most of the thing that they report, they usually are of uncertain nature, right? So they go to a place or an event and then they try and write down things, and it's mostly because of the urgency of the nature of newspaper reports. What happens, there are many gaps. Most of the times they don't know the whole of the thing in entirety. Hence, in media writing, there is a tendency to use a lot of the media reports, right? The ones that you see in the newspapers or the columns, they usually have a tendency to use a lot of passive verbs, right? But when you're using it in, say, scientific reports or formal reports like the ones that we're seeing, right? Sales report, skill report, we stay away from passive verbs. So the list of the verbs that we have produced here also, you'll see all of them are active verbs, right? We don't have passive voice at all. So voice needs to remain active in all these cases. But one case where you can find a lot of passive voice is the media reports. We are not going to discuss that because they're usually not counted under the professional reports, right? These are the ones which we consider as professional reports. And here it's mostly always going to be the active voice. Okay. All right. Anything else? Anything else about the language that you see here? What is the nature of the sentence? If you look at it closely, I'm going to leave in some pointers here for you to remember. Active voice, tense, simple, present, or past forms. You can make a note of it if you want, right? It's in the chat box. Formal verbs. And then the next one I just asked you about is the nature of the sentences. How does a sentence look? Do we have simple sentences? Do we have complex sentences? What's your idea?
Complex sentences.
Yes, right. So you will see that there's a lot of usage of yes, Nitin. You're also right. Complex, right? The sentences that you see here are mostly complex in nature. And what are complex sentences? Wherein you have at least one dependent clause, right? So why do we use complex sentences? What's the reason why we use complex sentences? Why can't we write simple sentences? Now, it doesn't mean that your report will not have any simple sentence. It will have simple sentence, but the tendency in reports usually are, or generally in professional writing, is to use more complex sentences, right? And what do you think would be the reason for that? What does complex sentences have? They have the ability to take in clauses within, right? Subordinate clauses, or what is also known as the embedded clauses. What are the functions of embedded clauses? Why do we use them in a sentence? So adjectival clauses, what do? They give you additional information about the noun, right? Adverbial clauses, what do? They give you information, additional information with regards to the time, place, frequency, manner, reason, condition, so on and so forth, right? Noun clauses, again, gives you additional information about a particular noun in the sentence, right? Or acts in place of another noun in the sentence. So all of this, basically, there's one thing that is reverberating, which is additional information. So because reports are usually also written for either informing or for analyzing a situation or for describing a particular problem statement, there's a lot of information that needs to be processed in, right? So it's not like a simple command or something that you produce in a conversation. So to add in more details to pack in more information, the best form of sentence that can be used is a complex sentence, right? And the reason is also that although we can do that using shorter, simple sentences also, in the craft of writing, right, it is not considered a good practice to go on writing simple sentences. They look crisp and short, but if you go on writing just short sentences, the tone becomes very monotonous, and it can reduce the readability quotient of your work. A best written work will be a combination of simple, compound, and complex sentences. Even among the three, complex sentences will do the job better because it has the ability to pack in more information in one sentence, right? Now, that doesn't mean that you put everything together into a long, long sentence. We'll look at that as well in the next class. We have a couple of exercises to know what makes a good sentence in writing and what makes a bad sentence in writing. But right now, you need to understand that your work has to be a combination of all of these, right? You shouldn't be writing just short sentences and only complex sentences. But between both of these, the choice of writing only short, simple sentences is more harmful than using only complex sentences, right? The reason being the other one sounds extremely monotonous to the reader, right? People would not want to read it. And in professional writing, we expect people to produce discourses, and it has to be the structure of the sentences we use have to be complex in nature, because we are not looking here to produce documents which are in bulleted formats, right? So for that reason, a choice of a mix of all of these kinds of sentences is better. Complex sentence is the best choice because of its ability to pack in ample amount of information in one go. Okay, so keep these things in mind: active voice, tense, simple present or past forms, formal verbs, and complex sentences, right? With regards to the use of language in technical reports or even proposals, which we'll look at in the next class again, the basic language that you need to keep in mind, the elements of language, the characteristics of the formal language that you're required to use in any of these professional texts would be these, right? Just 5 points. You don't have to remember anything more than that with regards to the language. Only these 4 or 5 points regarding the voice, the tense, the verbs, and the nature of the sentences, right? This much is enough to produce one good document. Rest of the things that you see, anyway, they are, you take inputs from the kind of material you want to produce, right? So this one definitely has figures and statistics because we were reading charts and graphs, but not all of it would have that, right? So that would be decided, what content goes in would be decided based on the purpose of writing. But the language for any of this report would remain common. These 5 points will have to be taken care of in any of the reports you write. And again, like in the short reports, this particular 5 points that I'm saying is applicable to the longer reports also. Okay, no matter whether your report is of 1 page or 2 page, or whether the report is of 200 page, the aspects of language that we just discussed remains the same, even for that. Okay, understood? Any questions as of now? Were you also able to see these things in the way the report is written? I did not produce one on my own, and I took this example because I thought this very clearly specified how a formal report should be written. Is this understood? Yes, no? People still here?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
all right. Any questions that you have up to now? Okay, all right. So just keep these few pointers in mind while you're drafting reports. Make adjustments based on what you're writing it for, but the main principles remain the same. Okay. Now, the last thing before we close, can you suggest me a structure for writing a formal report based on this example that you have on screen? What do you think would be the subsections? If at all, somebody asks you, please create a template or a skeletal for me to write a formal report. According to you, what would it look like? We discussed the structure for the longer one. Remember, last time we talked about title, executive summary, abstract, table of contents. So the front matter, the body, and the back matter, right? Remember, we did that in the last class. But that is for a larger report, right? A voluminous report work. But how about something like this? This is a short one, 140 words. What do you think would be a suggested structure or template for this? You can leave it in the chat in case if you don't want to speak, but I would appreciate if you can unmute and speak. What would we begin with? Let's talk about the first one.
Title.
Title, right? So that is unnegotiable. You cannot have a report without a title, right? This one was for practice, so this is not title, but then in the actual format, you'll definitely have a title. So we begin with a title. Then,
Date.
no, this one doesn't require date and all. So that one would be required for correspondence reports, right? The newspaper reports. These reports we don't need. No need of date and all that. Title, yes. Then look at the sentence you have here. This report summarizes trends in fatal workplace, so on and so forth. So what is it doing?
Overview of report.
Overview, or let's call it the purpose statement. Right? Like you remember, we had purpose statement for the email as well, right? And I told you that this is going to be the case for any text you will produce in professional domain. You certainly will have to communicate your purpose first to the audience. And same applies to the report. The very first sentence that you see here, this report summarizes trends in fatal workplace accidents and work-related stress during the period 1990-2003. The first half of the sentence is the purpose statement. You're declaring the central subject of the report. So that will have to be the first thing. Then followed by that, now here you can have mini subsections like you have for the longer reports. That depends on you, right? Whether you want to choose, your choice of information, whatever you want to present first, you can put in there. So let's say purpose statement. After that, subheading 1, subheading 2, subheading 3. There should be at least 3 subheadings or at least 2 subheadings based on the report that you're writing. So title, purpose statement, subheading 1, subheading 2, subheading 3, and conclusion. So here subheading 1 is talking about the trends in 2 of the thing, fatal workplace accidents and work-related stress, right? If you think there is too little information for you to process and present, you can finish it off in one subheading also. But if there are more than one thing to talk about, make sure that you divide them into 2 different headings and put them across. You can choose to put a heading, or you can omit it like they have omitted it here. They haven't put any subheading, right, separately. But they've divided it, but they have not put in any separate subheadings. But if you want to put, you can put as well. So this is our first subheading. Do we have other subheadings here? No, this is a very short report, right? So only 3 sentences or so. So there is no need of dividing, but in case there is more items or entities that you need to disclose or need to talk about, then you can divide it further. Okay. So in whatever sense, your order would be title, then purpose statement, then subheadings, which is 1 or 2 or 3, right? And what is very, very important here is conclusion. You cannot stop or finish writing your report without having given a proper conclusion. Look at this one, the report that you have here. In conclusion, the 2 charts show that while British workplaces are becoming safer, employees feel themselves to be under greater pressure. Right? So irrespective of whether your report is long or short, you have to follow this particular format. Right? So this is like a mini structure for how you would write a formal report. Title, purpose statement, subheadings or subheading based on how much you have to write about and what the topic is, and finally conclusion. Okay, so this is a skeletal for building your formal reports. Okay, all good? So we'll work on this one in the next class. And once you finish writing, there's another question that I want to work with you. Now that already has a handwritten note. So I'll give you that handwritten note as you come to the class. And then looking at those notes, you will also build something like this report, right? You will write something like this. Once you've finished writing that, and then I'll discuss with you the aspects of language, which is what is considered as bad writing practices and what is considered as good writing practices, right? In emails and all, it's anyway a very small piece of writing. So we didn't have the space to discuss all that. But since this one contains a lot of, many sentences, especially complex sentences, we'll discuss those good writing, bad writing strategies also. Okay. So I think that would give you a comprehensive understanding of how to write this down. Okay. And sorry for today, something has happened to my system. So I was not able to share my screen in the beginning. We lost a bit of a time. Sorry about that, but it's okay. We'll make it up next class. All right.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So can we close for today? Okay. All right. Then see you all next week again.